Hey AuthorTube, it's Becky from BrekkeWrites, and this is my quarter 1 reading wrap up. The first quarter of the year, so January, February, and March, have not been my best reading months of all time. In fact, I used to read like 10 to 15 books in January alone, and I have only completed five books so far in this entire year. So suffice it to say that being a working from home mother of 4 means I don't read as much as when I was single. So yeah, I only have 5 books to report. I just have not been in the mood to read, and it's my focus has just not been there. And I think a lot of us probably can feel the same way. We're either totally distracting ourselves by reading as much as we can, or our focus is gone and we're not reading or writing or doing anything at the level that we intended to. I want to quickly go over the books that I did complete. The first one is Dumpling. This is by Julie Murphy, and this is the first book that I finished this year. I have a review of this and the TV movie that they did on Netflix that I'm going to be posting soon, so check that out. When it's up, I'll leave it in a link down below, but this wrap up will come up before that. So anyways, future people, you can check it out. But anyway, I really enjoyed this. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was very cute. This is a very different story than the Netflix movie adaptation. So if you have seen the Netflix adaptation first, the emphasis here is much more on the romance than it is on the beauty pageant. I was hoping for more, actually, of the beauty pageant. I enjoyed the dynamic that Willa Dean had with her mom and with her sort of ragtag friends and with her best friend, and the tension when they are beginning to become different people and go different directions. I enjoyed that, and I, like I said, gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The second book that I finished this month was a contemporary, but also in a very different vein, and that is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. I got this around Christmas time last year, and this is a contemporary about a girl who has all of her sort of expectations around her self-identity shattered when tragedy strikes. And so she runs away to college from the West Coast to the East Coast and stops talking to her best friend. And now it's Christmas break and her best friend has come to visit, basically is forcing a visit upon her. And she is having to work through the grief and the sort of betrayal that she is feeling after this event that happens to her. I don't want to give away more than that because it would be kind of spoilers. This story is told in a very artistic manner where you don't know what the catalyst is. You just know that something is sort of coming at you and you're not quite sure what it is. You're piecing together the thing that happened and the events surrounding what happened. And so it's almost literary fiction in that way. It is written beautifully. The sentences in this are gorgeous. I will say I didn't love it. I wanted to love it, but I didn't love it. And I don't know if it was because I was frustrated by the style, which again, you're figuring out what the thing is that hurt our main character. And that just got irritating because it was very clear that the author was trying to hold out as long as possible. And there were just moments where I was like, this is dumb because it's hurting the narrative to not know more of the details. So I got frustrated with that. But the writing was gorgeous. It was a beautifully told story, and it had a lot of meaningful teen angst, not teen angst for the sake of teen angst. And I really appreciated this. So I believe I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but if you are looking for something that deals with grief and deals with the complications of family and what it means to be a family and what it means to have a found family, I would definitely recommend We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. The third book that I finished was an audiobook that my husband and I listened to over several weeks in car rides. And that was Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger. This is the story of a boy in, I believe, 1964. It's told from the perspective of him as a grown man looking back on the summer when he was 13 and all the events that happened that summer. You find out in the very beginning that there are going to be 5 people who die. There are 5 deaths that happened that summer, some meaningful, some not meaningful, but they all impact how this teenage boy basically begins to see the world and how he begins to see it through more adult eyes, and that it's not all child's play anymore. I wouldn't say that this was one I would necessarily pick up on my own, but it was recommended to my husband from a very good friend of his, and I will say it was beautifully written. I thought the story was good. I thought the messaging was good. The theme was good. There is a bit of a mystery that is at the heart of the story, which I liked, but it isn't my kind of novel. It is literary fiction, and I don't love literary fiction. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. If you're someone who likes literary fiction, if you want to really wrestle with what is grace, where do you find goodness when tragedy is all around you, very relevant right now, I would recommend it. I really would. The major hiccups I had was that I basically felt like this was an old white man book, and my husband, being a white man, didn't really notice that, but I did, and so that irritated me a little bit. There are some minor tropes that I think are somewhat problematic, and if you are curious, I will happily tell you offline so I don't spoil anything. But overall, I really did enjoy the story because it's about complicated relationships and complicated people, and how do children who are emerging into adults deal with adults who are complicated and understand that the world is not as black and white as they thought it was. So I enjoyed it. If you are interested in a piece of literary fiction that is readable, it's not snooty, it's not uppity literary fiction, it's very readable, it does have good pacing, it's very interesting, then I would recommend Ordinary Grace. The last 2 books that I was able to finish this quarter were by the same guy, David the Good, and he is a gardener extraordinaire. He has written several books on gardening. He currently lives, I think, in Belize. He has also lived in Florida and other parts of the United States, and has written extensively on gardening and all things gardening related. He has a YouTube channel. I will link that down below, although he's more active right now on Instagram because he lives in the middle of nowhere, so his internet connection is not great. But he has a lot of really interesting articles and posts on survival gardening, and those of you who've been around a while know that when I get stressed out, I reread things like cookbooks and hobby books, which are mostly around gardening and cooking, because those are my only non-writing related hobbies. The first one was Grow or Die, and it's basically everything you need to know to have a survival garden. His focus is, if the world is ending, what would you need to grow? And as you might have guessed, this was motivated by a sense of deep existential angst, because I kind of feel like the world is ending. It's not, I recognize that, but this was a way for me to kind of exert some control and read up on something that I already had an interest in and get some good feedback and good information. I enjoyed this. It was very readable. It had some good insights. It wasn't the most comprehensive book. There was definitely more I would have liked to have gotten from this, and it skews towards people in warmer climates, because he was in Florida and now, like I said, is in Central America, and so it skews more towards those locales, but there's still plenty of good information if you live in other parts of the country. I live in Zone 5B, so definitely not a tropical region. The 5th and final book that I completed right at the very end of this quarter was my second book by David the Good, and that was Compost Everything. Basically, it's a book on composting, and it breaks the rules of composting. Anybody here who's a gardener knows that there are rules, and you have to have a certain amount of brown to green, and you don't want to compost any dairy or meat products, and you have to have it at a certain temperature, blah, 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 blah. And he's basically saying, nah, you don't have to do any of that, and here's how I know. I have found it interesting. It wasn't as helpful as I wanted, because his method is the cut and drop method, basically where you just take your compost and you sprinkle it directly onto your garden beds and then let it decompose naturally like nature would do. My problem is that since I'm using raised beds, that doesn't really work so well for me. So there was some good information, and kind of explained the process of decomposition and why compost works to begin with, and why he uses nature's model rather than science models. I appreciate that. Was it the most helpful? No, it wasn't the most helpful, but it was a good resource. It wasn't super expensive. I have it as an ebook. I'm glad I read it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. 5 books. No stellar wins, right? Like, I didn't read any 5-star reviews. I have started 2 additional books, but I have not been able to finish them. The first one, you guys probably can guess. It's Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I am about halfway through this, and I am still plodding my way. I just don't have the energy to pick this up right now. It has a lot of emotional depth to it, and I know it's only going to get crazier from here on in. The pacing is slow, which is also part of why I'm not itching to pick this up, but I'm going to try to finish it in the next quarter. That'll be my goal, to finish it in the next 3 months. But I have read about halfway through this one, so we'll see if I can finish the other half soon. The second book that I am currently working my way through is The Family Garden Plan by Melissa K. Norris. She is also a gardener. She has a very prolific YouTube channel and has written several other books that I have read. This is a really, really beautiful collection of information on how to plant a garden if you want to actually feed your family from it, like feed your whole family from your garden, and how much you need to grow, because a lot of gardeners have no idea, since most of us haven't been raising our own food forever. I just started this. I got this in the mail recently, and so far I really enjoyed it. So these are the 2 books that I have just started this month, and I am hoping to read in the next quarter. All right, y'all, only 5 books this quarter. Not going to get to my 30 book a year goal if I only read 5 books a quarter, but I'm okay with that. It's been a wild ride so far. Comment down below and let me know, how many books have you read in the last 3 months? What has your first quarter of 2020 looked like? I think it's been a crazy time for most of us. So have you been reading a lot? Have you been not reading so much? Have you been picking up books that you don't normally read? I know that I've had the itch to do a lot of rereading and revisiting worlds that I already know and love, and I already have my emotions invested in, so I may do more of that. We'll see. I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!